Asmodee now has control of the One Ring, and with that power, they will wreak havoc on the intellectual property of Middle Earth. Or maybe they'll use that power for a greater good. So, guys, Asmodee, as you probably have known if you've been in this hobby for a while, have been gobbling up board game companies all over the place. They own Z-Man Game, Days of Wonders, Fantasy Flight, and just so many more. But I mentioned those because those are the ones that are really going to matter for this conversation. But along with those, they have got distribution rights to games, and they've also gathered intellectual properties. A little bit last year, they had announced that they actually got the sole intellectual property rights for tabletop games for the books specifically for Middle Earth Entertainment. So any Lord of the Rings game that is not based on the movies has to go through Asmodee's approval. They have the ability to license this intellectual property. So does that mean nothing else can ever, no other company can ever create a Lord of the Rings game? Does that mean Asmodee is this big faceless corporation that's going to just make sure that they squeeze every single penny out of Middle Earth before they cast it to the side for their next project? Honestly, guys, I don't think that's going to be the case. You see, Asmodee is a big company. It's an investment company, and they're always switching hands. But the people who have been running Asmodee seem to be people who are actually love the hobby. They enjoy the hobby. They've been doing things that look like could be on the right path. And I think this Middle Earth licensing agreement is one of those things as well. So on the face, having a company control the licensing agreement seems a little like, oh no, where's all the independent, creators going to make their Lord of the Rings games? But let's be honest, guys. You don't just want every Harry, Sally, and Susan to, is that the phrase? Maybe that's not the phrase, but it doesn't matter. You don't want just anybody to create a board game for an intellectual property, because we've seen what that does. As a Marvel fan, X-Men fan, I have seen a lot of bad X-Men game, and I wish Asmodee's had the licensing agreement to that. Because what this is ultimately going to mean is that if you are another company and you are wanting to license a Lord of the Rings game, you have to go through Asmodee and get their permission, which means Asmodee has to like your game well enough to give you that permission. So a lot of this information I am getting from the Board Game Wire. It's a really great news website for board games. I recommend checking it out. And they interviewed sorry, I'm not good with names, but they interviewed the head of Asmodee Games, which is Luke Peterschmidt, I think is what his name is. And they sat down with him and asked, what does this actually mean for the Lord of the Rings products? And he goes into really good detail about what this actually means for the hobby and for Lord of the Rings. And ultimately what he is saying is that what a lot of fans are saying, and that is you don't want an oversaturation of the market for Lord of the Rings games or Marvel games or any intellectual property games. And with this control that Asmodee has, they will be able to make sure this doesn't happen. So here we see right here is a product timeline, which I thought was kind of interesting, of what Asmodee actually came out with for Lord of the Ring games. I say Asmodee, but a lot of these are going to be Fantasy Flight and Z-Man and other games like that. But you can see we had a few games in 2000. The original Lord of the Rings from, I believe it's from Reiner Knizia, maybe one of the first co-op games ever in the hobby. Obviously, pandemic really made that popularize that, but I think this Lord of the Rings game is the game that's been credited as the first co-op game. So anyways, and then we have, I think this is Confrontation. I can't really tell what that one says. Maybe Confrontation. Well, regardless, then we got War of the Rings, which is a big army skirmish game. Then we got Lord of the Ring cards game, which is still going strong. But you had an entire 2004 to 2011 before you had another game in there that was really worth it. I think there was also War of the Ring as well. And what was the hit? There was a hidden deduction game where you're moving around. I think it's called War of the Ring. No, it's not War of the Ring. I'm looking at War of the Ring right now. No, there's another one where you're the wraiths tracking down the ring, and then you can play War of the Ring, which is kind of cool. But anyways, but I digress. So we got Lord of the Rings, and then we have 2011 all the way to 2019 before we get another really solid Lord of the Rings game. And then you hit 2004 and 2005, where we feel like we were inundated with a bunch of Lord of the Ring games, but these all came from Asmodee, or an Asmodee affiliate. So what we're doing now is that now that Asmodee has control of this intellectual property, you have to ask them permission to use this the IP. So what they're going to do is they're going to make sure, I'm trying to find where it says here, they're going to make sure that, like, here we go. If they already have a trick-taking game, like Asmodee has a very successful trick-taking game, why would they allow another Lord of the Rings themed trick-taking game to compete against that one? It just doesn't make sense. But the question on Board Game Wire was, so do you anticipate it being, say, one big Euro a year, one trick taker a year, etc.? And ultimately what they were saying is they don't know what this looks like quite yet. They just know they don't want these games. They don't want like 5 Euros coming out of the same year. They don't want 5 trick-taking games coming out the same year. And also, what's interesting about this is that the Middle-earth Enterprises still has to approve any game that is presented to them. So you have to bring it to Asmodee. Asmodee has to feel very confident about this product. And if they are, they can then bring it to Middle-earth Entertainment to get its final approval. So in the end, I think this is really going to be good for the intellectual property of Lord of the Rings. But just for, so we can see the way things have plotted out here. And while people are freaking out, I'm going to show you guys on Board Game Geek some of the Lord of the Ring games that have come out in the past recent years. And you can see Lord of the Rings, Duel to Middle-earth, Asmodee. Lord of the Rings, Journey to Middle-earth, Asmodee. Lord of the Rings, Fate of the Fellowship, Pandemic System, Asmodee. Lord of the Rings, the card game, Asmodee. Trick-taking game, Asmodee. So you can see the top 5, some of the best cards is Asmodee. Lord of the Rings, Confrontation, Asmodee. Then we start getting into things that I don't know if any of these games are any good. There was Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring. This was, let's see if I have it pulled up here. I don't. This one was from like DC Deck Builder, that same engine. I know our friend Philip, he had this game, he really enjoyed it, but it ultimately got rid of it. So this is an example of a good deck building game that came out. So if Cryptozoic wanted to re-release this, they could actually, instead of trying to get the rights for it again through Middle-earth Entertainment, they could actually just go to Asmodee and say, hey, I want to republish this. Now, here's the caveat. This one is specifically for the movie, as you can see here, Noonline Cinema. So, and as I've said that they can go to Asmodee, they actually couldn't unless they wanted to retheme this or make it look different, which I also think is interesting too, because in the Daily Wire article, they talked about the consistency and the approving of the art as well. So I don't think they're going to have a standardized art, but they do want the final art approval as well, which is, I find, very interesting. So let's look at some of the other games that came out here. I know there's one that was on Flip the Table, and it was from, Color Art, I think is what it was. Yeah, the Crown Company. And that was considered one of the worst games ever made. And I think about those. Sorry, I'm trying to find it here. Let's see. Lord of the Rings Quest for Mount Doom. Yeah, let's take a look at this one. This one could be it. Color. Nope, that's Games Workshop. Yeah, there's actually a lot of these games that are from Games Workshop, which I found interesting, but I think they lost the license a long time ago. Oh, here it is. Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, Rose Art. That's a Crown Company. Yeah, if you ever want to hear about how bad this game is, go watch Flip the Table, and they review this game. They say it's one of the worst games ever. So, I mean, guys, we can panic. We can say, what are we going to do? That Asmodee keeps buying stuff up, but let's not be so black-pilled and actually think about what this could mean. I think this means no oversaturation, and I think it means a level of quality control that I think as a fan of Lord of the Rings, we should all be happy with. So there you go. Asmodee controlling one more thing. Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? What do you think of Asmodee just gathering all this stuff? I, for one, would love Asmodee to gather the intellectual property for the X-Men and give me a quality X-Men game, please. Get it away from WizKids, because I don't know what WizKids is doing, but they ain't making good X-Men games. So give it to Asmodee. That's my opinion anyways. What say you guys? Until next time, we'll see you around the board.